Hello everyone, and welcome to this second video covering Stockfish's opening repertoire. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and in this video we are going to be having a look at Stockfish's choices in the Sicilian 1e4 c5. Well, in the end, after an astronomical amount of analysis, that's nearly 3 million nodes, Stockfish plumps for a fairly typical choice for engines, but along the way it's flirted with some fairly far out stuff, and we're going to be having a look at all of that. So after e4 c5, well, in the end Stockfish plumps for knight f3, but at 900,000 million nodes, Stockfish actually prefers the move knight c3, and its main line is a6, knight f3, d6, and then g3, which is definitely a little bit weird. It's not surprising to see a Repertoire game featuring in this odd line. Now the Repertoire game went b5, bishop g2, bishop b7, d3. That was Rapport Serrana in 2021. Stockfish's main line is e5, d3, g6, and bishop g5, which is a new move. A previous game had gone 6a4, which is also quite reasonable. But bishop g5, bishop e7, h4, h6, takes, bishop g2, knight c6, queen d2, stopping black from castling, just attacking the pawn on h6. Bishop e6, knight h2. This knight's coming round to e3. I mean, it's basically like a sort of a closed Sicilian, really. Castles, knight e3, king b8, castles, and well, Stockfish gave itself a 0.29 advantage. Stockfish didn't stay like that, but still, after a huge amount of analysis, it was choosing this line, so maybe one to look at, I think. However, to knight f3 is Stockfish's main line eventually. d6, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, and a6. And most engines in the end come to the Najdorf as black's best system in the Sicilian. At any rate, it's the system that the best system that black can sort of enforce, you know, right from an early stage. There are other openings like the Sveshnikov, which it might consider to be even better, but those can't actually be forced. White's got a lot of very good transpositional alternatives. So after a6, well, this is another interesting point. In the end, Stockfish comes to f3, bishop e3. You know, those are always a little bit interchangeable. But at 1.5 million nodes, Stockfish is looking at bishop d3, which was Koivisto's choice in the end. And, you know, this line, it amazes me because it was really thought to be completely amateurish in the pre-computer age. You know, you either played your bishop to e2 or to c4, or not at all, but you didn't put it on d3. But it is actually pretty sensible, and there've obviously also been some high-level games in this. The key point actually is that the engines always feel that black's best pawn structure is to play e7 to e5. And, well, you know, if you play the bishop to e2, for example, after e5, you can either put your knight to b3, where it's okay, but it's a little bit out of the way, or to f3, where it gets in the way of your f-pawn. After bishop d3, e5, you can put this knight round to e2. And this knight's actually got quite a few nice possibilities if it's supporting f2 to f4, and this knight can also go round to g3, maybe aiming for the f5 square. So actually it's a very reasonable form of development. Now it doesn't actually give white, you know, that much against best play, but after all, you know, what does? I think Koivisto was looking for plans with f4 here. Here actually Stockfish is just looking for something very quiet, just a4, rook e1, knight c5, knight g3, and white's just basically trying to entrench itself on the light squares. This knight is coming round to f1 to e3, attacking d5, queen c7, rook d1, queen c5, a5, and Stockfish gives itself a 0.28 advantage here. It's not huge, but yeah, black's going to have to work hard to create any counterplay there. So that's actually quite interesting. But in the end, Stockfish doesn't think that's the best line. It plays the move f3, and then we get e5. Always e5 from the engines. They don't want to consider systems like e6, you know, that Kasparov was so fond of in his heyday. So e5, knight b3, bishop e6, bishop e3, h5. I was one of the earliest people, I think, to play these systems with h5 regularly, and I did really, really well with them. I should have won a gorgeous game against Vishianand, but failed miserably in the end. But I did beat Morozevich in this line, and yeah, I got some very, very good positions with it. And it's nice to see that, 25 years later, it's still popular. h5 is just intends to stop white from expanding on the king side with g4. So queen d2, at 300,000 million nodes, Stockfish is just playing bishop e2, knight bd7, and then f4. Interesting move. Essentially what you're trying to do with this move, well, you're trying to attack this bishop on e6, and you're trying to say, well, okay, you've played h5 to stop g4. I'm not aiming for g4 anymore. I'm just going to claim that this is a weakness on the king side. Not silly. But queen c7, h3, b5, castles king side now. Bishop e7, a3, castles. King h1, bishop c4, and now bishop d3 is Stockfish's novelty. And it thought that that white had a little edge in this position, but at much more depth, it goes for queen d2, and a very sharp line. Knight d5, g6, we castle, and we just give away this this central pawn, and just claim that by grabbing that central pawn on the light square, black's actually weakening all the light squares, and of course black's exchanged off its light square bishop as well. So pretty sharp, being a few games in this line. a4, always the rook's pawns. This one's just a sacrifice, just asking black, well, go on, take that pawn, spend some more time, waste some more time. And a5, and this is actually still correspondence, of pretty high class correspondence game between a 25-70 and a 25-28. That's real top players. And there black went knight bd7. Stockfish recommends knight bd5, and after c4 takes, rook e8. Well, yeah, I mean, white's got a slight edge here, but black's doing fine. I think the line ends up as a 0.49 advantage for white, but I mean, not an amazingly winning position. So that's pretty interesting. A lot of analysis, and it looks like this 6f3 line is the best, which, to be honest, if you'd asked me in the pre-computer age when I was a professional, I would have definitely said that was true as well. So that was the Najdorf. Now, we've got a number of requests during the Komodo and Koivisto series, so I'm going to do a little bit more on those. Different types of Sicilians. G6. What does Stockfish want against the dragon? Well, f3 as well. Universal response, I think. Bishop g7, bishop e3, castles queen d2. And now not the Yugoslav attack with bishop c4 or one of those offbeat lines like g4 that I was very keen on when I was studying, but castles. And then this main line. Takes, knight c6, takes, bishop d4. Takes, queen b6, knight a4, queen c7, and now not c4 like Hikaru Nakamura played against Gwaine Jones in a internet tournament 2021, but just bishop c4. And essentially Stockfish just thinks that it's got a slight advantage in this line. This is still all theory. Queen c3, h5, g3, e6. And now there was a game Muzichuk against Smilite, ILAT 2012, that continued rook e1. And here Stockfish just wants to play a3, knight d5, queen d4, queen e7, rook e1, rook b8, h4. It's a slightly more pleasant position for white. You've got some dark squares to aim at, and some sort of feeling for the future that you might be able to do something good, but black's very, very solid indeed. Ends up as a 0.65 advantage for white, but yeah, nothing too amazing there. But it looks like a pretty, safe and slightly annoying line to play against the dragon. Certainly a dragon player looking for tactics and big theory. Yeah, you're not really getting that here at all. So what about other lines on move 2? Well, of course, there's knight c6. And funnily enough, for quite a bit of depth, up to about 100,000 million nodes, Stockfish is still quite happy to play the Sveshnikov. But then around there, it switches to bishop b5 and never looks back. So bishop b5 is the line, and then, just like all the other engines, they love playing these e6 systems. Always feels a bit full of holes, I can play moves like this, for example, and well, it just looks like those dark squares are going to be weak somehow. Actually, Stockfish just wants to play castles, knight e7, rook e1, knight g6, c3. Very, very sensible. There's a game of Grandelius against Carana, Riga 2021, where Fabiano played a6, and then bishop e7, d4, takes, d5, takes, which Fabiano later managed to win, although obviously White's got a slight advantage here, of course. Bishop e7, d4, takes, d5, knight c3 is Stockfish's line. D takes, c4 takes, a3, and we've just got a typical sort of IQP. In actual fact, yeah, we don't go for an attack. We just aim for the weaknesses on the dark squares, those slight queenside weaknesses. It's not that much for White at all, 0.51 according to Stockfish, but a slight advantage definitely for White. But that is bishop b5. So against knight c6, Stockfish doesn't want to play a mainline open Sicilian. What if we force it to go d4? Well, Stockfish goes for a Sveshnikov, and like all the engines do. Really quite amazing, you know, in the 1970s when Timoshenko and Sveshnikov were pushing this system. You know, everyone thought they were crazy, and now you know, the engine's 3600 rated. They're all saying, yeah, this is right. I mean, the great thing about these systems for black, about the Sveshnikov compared to the Najdorf Sicilian, is that well, you've got this same blockade of the central squares, no e4 to e5 pushes from White, central foothold. But on top of that, you've got this knight on a3 that's not particularly well placed. So, you know, an extra advantage there compared to the Najdorf. Now, Stockfish's line is quite interesting. A4, knight cb4. Been played quite a bit at top-level lines. There was a game, Paravian against Dubov, Chess Internet Tournament 2022, where White took with a knight on b4, which is pretty sensible. But c takes b4 played by Stockfish, bishop d7, bishop a6, castles, king h8, bishop c4, f5, takes, b3, takes. And you've got this typical Sveshnikov position where, well, White's got a great outpost on d5 for the knight, although not 100% clear how much influence there is. You've got a pass pawn on the queen side, so that might be dangerous. Black's got, you know, quite a bit of activity. This f2 pawn might get a little bit sensitive on the half-open f-file, and yeah, this is following a correspondence game again, and g3 is Stockfish's novelty. But e4, rook d1, queen f8, b5, queen c8, knight b6, little discovered attack there, takes, queen e4, and I think we can see where this is heading, just to a dead draw. Interesting idea. I mean, I think there's probably some sharper lines that you could look at with White. Maybe not better, but more confusing to a human. But basically looks like, you know, the Sveshnikov, as far as Stockfish is concerned, is pretty even. So, okay, that's 2 knight c6, but what about 2 e6? So, knight c3 is Stockfish's line here. Yeah, I mean, sometimes engines do this. Sometimes they go d4, and sometimes they prefer knight c3 first. Takes, and now a few possibilities here. Knight f6 is really looking for the Sveshnikov. We're going knight db5, d6, and bishop f4 here. e5, bishop g5. But actually the engines, just like all of the elite players nowadays, they prefer not to head back into the Sveshnikov. They go for the 4 knights, e5, knight d5, knight e4. And there's been a lot of games on this. Stockfish's main line is the game Firouzja against Rapport, Bucharest 2022 here. Knight f2, bishop a6, king f3, all looks crazy. But somehow, you know, the centre's closed, the diagonals aren't really open, so very hard for black to get any concerted pressure against the white king there. Bishop e2, rook d8, b4, and now knight c8, queen c5 was Firouzja against Rapport. Seem to remember that Firouzja was doing quite well in that game. But g5 is Stockfish's line, fg, and now a novelty. Knight g6 was a 2018 correspondence game. c5 is what Stockfish wants. Pretty interesting. Just trying to give black give white rather completely ruined pawns after takes. 2 pawns, but ruined. B5, bishop b7, king e3, bishop g2, check, knight g6, rook b1, takes f4 check. I wouldn't guess that this was, all right for black, to be honest. Well, I mean, in all fairness, Stockfish gives it a 0.67 evaluation for white, which is quite nice. Certainly, this feels like a very unclear and rough position, but I would rather be white, I have to say. Particularly this bishop on g2 looks rather cut off from the rest of the world. So that's maybe a very interesting line for white against against this attempted Sveshnikov transposition. Now, another interesting line here is the Paulsen that was incredibly popular not that long ago. I think it's slightly less popular at the elite level nowadays, but obviously still a big opening line here. So bishop e3, a6, and well, again, Stockfish spends ages and ages on queen f3 and plays this queen exchange line. Takes, knight d4, bishop d4, bishop b7, f3, and claims a decent advantage. Was it 0.48 for white in this line? Yeah, I guess it's a slight advantage, not the the real red-blooded Sicilian that you might want to play, but it does look like a nice way of neutralizing all of black's play. And I mean, you've got moves like a4, for example, just playing all over the board, restricting black on the queen side and then attacking on the king side rather, and then attacking on the queen side after. So that's quite interesting. But in the end, after 1.5 million nodes of analysis, Stockfish plumps for g4 here, which, to be honest, I hadn't actually ever seen before, although I'm not completely up to date with this line. Well, as you can tell. But b5 and then knight takes c6, queen c6, queen d2. Amazing idea, really. Just completely ignoring this e4 pawn and just aiming for compensation in forms of open lines, open diagonals. So queen c6, bishop g2, d5, bishop b7, f4, and actually, I mean, this looks pretty good counterplay, really. Probably would need to do some more analysis on it to be sure of it. Now, funnily enough, there was a game not between such high-rated players, Pasini against Carnicelli, Aquiterma 2022, that carried on knight f4 with a quick draw, but knight d4 is Stockfish's move. Queen c4, b3, queen c3, takes, knight f5, castles, rook d3. We're picking up the c3 pawn. Rather dangerous situation for the black king here. But with some good old-fashioned engine, now she can escape. But actually, this looks quite an interesting line for white. Ends up as a 0.72 advantage. Well, I mean, it's going into opposite-coloured bishops. It looks quite drawn to me. But definitely along the way, black's had some awkward moments there. So this g4 line, very, very interesting for white, I think, as well. I also got a request to have a look at the Sicilian Khan with e6, so we are going to have a look at that. So let's have a look at d4, takes, and then a6. And strangely enough, h3 was Stockfish's top move at lower, they're not amazingly low, like 100,000 nodes or something, 100,000 million nodes, I mean, don't ask me why, h3, I can't really explain it. I mean, later it'll be handy if you want to play a bishop on e3 or something, but still, rather early. In the end, bishop d3 was Stockfish's main move, which is, more or less the main line. Bishop c5, knight b3, bishop a7, queen e2. Now, Magnus Carlsen played knight c6 in a game here against Duda, Oslo 2022. Bishop e3, d6, knight c3, knight f6, which is pretty common for how these lines go. Magnus ended up winning that one. Knight e7 is Stockfish's main move, and now e5, which seems to be a novelty from Stockfish. Castles, knight c3, d5, takes, bishop e3. And again, we're neutralizing that bishop on a7, but we're just making sure we've got open lines. I mean, this would need some work from my part in order to understand it, because Stockfish takes on e7, gives up the two bishops just like that, and then plays this move a4 on the queen side, you know, to restrict b5, I guess. I mean, these are moves, queen e3, fitting this queen into a self-pin. These are moves that I'm not 100% sure about, although it must be said that you know, Stockfish really ends up having some sort of control of the centre and queen side, which would presumably enable white to launch a kingside attack if black were to do nothing. But it's quite complicated play, so yeah, I mean, I'd need to spend some work understanding this. I mean, to be honest, you know, I'd sort of file this as black as decent compensation, but Stockfish, you know, gives it 0.75 for white, which is not stupid. So, interesting idea, but probably would need some more work there. But bishop d3 is Stockfish's main line against the Khan, which is pretty much the normal move. Knight c3. I just made Stockfish have a look at this as well. And then it plays lines. Again, there's been some high-level tests here. There's a game Paulsen against Firouzja 2021, live chess. I don't know whether that was just a blitz marathon or an actual tournament. Knight c6 was played by Firouzja, bishop d7, and then knight c6 played by Stockfish in its analysis. And now actually a low-rated game as that went rook e1, h4, bishop e3, takes h3, which turned out rather nicely for black. Bishop e3, takes h4, h3, knight h5, king g1 is what Stockfish wants. I mean, it swings and roundabouts with this h4, knight g3. I mean, you're going to get the knight into a3. It's just that it's not so easy to think where you're going to put the black king, because if you castle, this h4 pawn might be weak. You've also opened this a little bit, and castling queenside is a little bit risky with, well, quite a lot of firepower already looking, you know, towards it. So you know, that's black's dilemma. But in principle, you know, I've played these sort of positions with black before. I'm not too unhappy. Stockfish gives 0.44. And then finally, for all you Khan lovers out there, if there's c4, then knight f6, knight c3, bishop b4, queen d3, d5 is Stockfish's solution. And well, you know, it's maybe a tiny edge for white, but this is really nothing at all. And yeah, all the lines end up very easy. There was a recent Grandalius game against Pantu Salaya, Reykjavik 2021. But yeah, it was really nothing at all for white there. So that, I think, is our summary of the main lines of the Sicilian. We'll probably come across some more crazy stuff in our final video in this series. But as you can see, quite a lot of stuff and quite a lot of interesting little ideas and tweaks and preferences. So yeah, I mean, you know, take a look at lines like 6 bishop d3 against the Najdorf. You know, obviously definitely worth looking at, and some interesting stuff against the Paulsen, for example, or the Sveshnikov as well. Well, in the next video, we are going to be having a look at 1e4, e5. See you there.